glasses on. That's what did it. So, okay. We are now live on Facebook. So anybody who is watching us from our Facebook group is going to be able to see this too. And I thank everybody who's joining us tonight because I'm very excited about this presentation. It's so appropriate for this time of the year. Winter ducks, we were just talking about it before we got started about the areas near the lakefront that are going to be open because of warm water, because of the way the winds are going, and some of the places that we can go and see winter ducks. So this is going to be a great way to refresh our memories and maybe learn some things about the ducks that we're going to be seeing. And we're very pleased to have one of our board members, Michael Topp, being able to present this for us. So he's got a screen up for you to see right now. And so I'll let him get started. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Good evening, everyone. Tonight's Dunes-Calumet Audubon Society's presentation is on winter ducks. Pretty apropos because I believe early next week we hit the bottom of the bell curve as far as temperature goes for winter. So we'll progress all the way up and keep moving up a few degrees until we get to the end of July when we hit the top of the bell curve, the peak of the bell curve. So for tonight's presentation, what I'm going to do is show some of the winter ducks. I'm going to show you a picture of the duck, and then I'm going to kind of give you a few ID tips to how to ID it. And then I'm probably going to tell you maybe some places to try to find that duck. These are actually all my own pictures, so I'll be able to tell you where I took these pictures from and maybe can kind of give you a hint or a tip on where to go to try to find these. Also, during the presentation, I'll just give out some spots to go. Of course, it's winter time, so ice is always the limiting factor. Like in November, December, there was no ice, so you could pretty much go wherever you wanted to go. As we get into January and into February, we start getting some of the shelf ice moving in and some of the creeks and rivers starting to freeze. So you have to kind of play it by ear on where you want to go. But I'm going to even give you a couple of spots that, unless we have a polar vortex winter, they pretty much remain all winter. So you can always go see winter ducks there. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to give a couple fun facts about each of these birds. I think it's kind of important to learn some of the natural history of some of the birds and what kind of separates them from other birds as far as their natural history. So I'll just try to give a couple fun facts about it and some of the other facts about the birds as they go. So we'll kind of get started here. There's about 30 ducks that frequent Indiana during the year, and about 20 or so winter here. So we're going to look at those 20 ducks, and how I'm going to break it down is there's two families of ducks. One is the dabbling ducks, and a mallard would be a really good example of that. They tend to be in shallow water. They tend to, as I like to say, heads down, bottoms up. They tip up to feed. They rarely dive. And also another clue on them is when they take off directly from the water. They don't need any kind of a running start. So we'll start with the first one. And there is a mallard duck that I took over at the Highland Heron Rookery. Obviously, the mallard has that metallic green head, has a yellow bill. The male has a yellow bill with white sides. It's our most abundant duck. There's about 10 million of them in North America. They're the #1 game bird in the world. And again, so they're a really good example of what a dabbling duck is. Again, you see them tip up to feed. They're kind of optimistic feeders. The dabbling ducks, actually their legs are pretty far forward, so you can often see the dabbling ducks walking on land. Mallard's a good example. You see them walking through your yard. You'll see them walking to your feeders. You'll see them walking along the shoreline to maybe get nuts and seeds off the shore. And the other dabblers can do it also because their feet are pretty far forward. It's good for walking, but not good for diving, which is why they don't dive. So this is the mallard duck, again, by far our most abundant duck. But sometimes things don't come out quite the way that they seem, because This is also a mallard duck. It's a leucistic mallard. There's a very small percentage of mallard ducks that have a genetic aberration. It's not an albino because you can see the dark eye and you can see the little pigmentation. And the difference between an albino and a leucistic duck or leucistic bird is the fact that leucistic birds, even though they lose almost all of their plumage, they keep some of it. So this female mallard kept a little bit of her brown plumage. I've seen leucistic birds. I've photographed leucistic birds like blackbirds, robins. I have a really nice picture of a tree swallow. And leucistic birds often look like this, but sometimes they keep little patches of their normal pigmentation. So they might have a patch like this, might have a patch of green or a patch of, the brown of the female mallard. So I just kind of threw that out there because occasionally they're uncommon. And I took this over at Forsyth Park, but I've seen them over at Roxana. I've seen them at West Beach. I saw one at Stone Lake in LaPorte County many years ago. So it's something to just kind of look out for. Again, it's a mallard and it'll breed like a normal mallard, but it has a genetic aberration to it. So, and another characteristic of mallards is if they can catch it, they're gonna breed with it. So they'll hybridize with pretty much any of the other dabbler ducks, that they in our area. There's like 11 species of dabblers that come through here, and we're going to look at 7 of them that winter. And to show you how they hybridize, there's a mallard black hybridize. So that you can see the green on the head of the mallard, but it has mostly the body of a black duck. So another example of how they'll hybridize with other dabbling duck species. Here's the next duck. I took this over at Roxana Pond. It's a black duck. Its nickname is called the dusky duck because it's kind of dusky colored. It's actually a bird from New England. They barely reached their breeding range here. There used to be a pair that used to breed over at the Heron Rookery in Highland, but I haven't seen them breed there for a long time. And I basically think they're being either bred out or the fact that they're just going back east. They're pretty common in New England. And so we're pretty much at the western edge of their breeding range. And also it's much more common to find them here in wintertime. Again, this is a male with a yellow bill. You can see the purple on his wing. So it's a black duck and they're closely related to mallards. But if you go to New England, it's the most common duck there. Next dabbler you want to look at is the gadwall. You can see its nickname is called the gray duck, and you can see why. It's pretty much a gray indescript duck with some cinnamon in the wings. I think I took this over at Roxana Pond. I'm going to keep saying Roxana Pond in the wintertime because it's one of the places, because of the kind of the thermal pollution that happens there. The water's kept open pretty much year round. So when a lot of these other areas freeze up, a lot of the lakes freeze up, this lake usually stays open, and this pond and river kind of stays open. So it's a great spot. And another good reason is you can basically sit in your car, pull off to the side, and let all these ducks just kind of come right by you. So if it's really cold out, it's kind of nice just to be able to just roll down the window and let these birds pass by and be able to watch these ducks pretty much up close and personal. Gadwall, the name it's an old Indian name, and it's basically called it goes for noisy duck. I'm not really sure why they called it that because it's no more noisy than any of the other ducks, but that's the name, and apparently that's stuck. So this is a gadwall, which is the gray duck. I'm basically showing you mostly the male ducks because they're just so much more colorful and easy to identify. But a way to see the female ducks is in the fall and in the winter, they basically already start pair bonding. So if you see a male, there's usually a female that's not too far away that he's interested in. You'll see them head bobbing. You'll see them both head bobbing as they start bonding. So that's a good way to find female ducks, is to look at the male and then see the bird that he's basically courting. So we're going to look at mostly males on the dabblers, but when we get to the next group, we're going to look at females I'll explain why. So this is a gadwall duck. The next one is the shoveler. Look at the bill on that. bird. The mallard has white sides. This has roughest sides, and the mallard has a yellow bill, and this has this long. It's about 2.5 inches bill, um, where it basically uses it to sift through vegetation. It's kind of uses it. It has combs in its bill, so kind of like a whale that sifts through and gets out krill and plankton. That's what this bird does. So it goes in the muck and pulls in water, and then it kind of sifts through with like these comb-like projections and basically sifts out insects, seeds, plant material. And so this is the northern shoveler. And the female has the same. She has a brown bill, but she also has that 2.5 inch bill. This is the northern pintail. You can see that stripe going, that white stripe going up on the neck. It's known as the elegant duck because it tends to sit high in the water. And you can see that chocolate colored head and a blue bill. And the male has those two pintails sticking out that are always up. I like pintails because basically they're one of the first birds to come back. There's a few that winter, and Roxana would be a good place to see them. I've seen them at the Han Marina in the wintertime. The dabblers tend to be in more shallow water, so you kind of want to look for areas with shallower water because, again, they feed by tipping up, so they have to be able to get to the bottoms. But in migration, you can get any bird anywhere, so you can get flocks of them even out on the big lake. They're just not feeding, they're just resting. I like the pintails because as the ice breaks, usually in February, they start coming back. They're one of our first birds to come back. They also tend to nest early. They nest north of here, but they actually start nesting in April. So they're one of the first duck species to the north that actually start nesting there. So this is the northern pintail, again, one of the dabblers. I talked about hybrids. I talked about mallards when to hybrid with the other dabblers. This is a northern pintail with that hybridized with a mallard. You can see some of the characteristics of the mallard, and you can see some of the characteristics of the pintail. Has that green head of the mallard, has the blue bill of the pintail, has the long tail of the pintail, has the breast of the pintail, but you can see part mallard in it. So this is a mallard pintail that I took over here at the Highland Heron Rookery. And again, dabblers tend to like, as long as the ice stays open, they tend to like the shallower areas like marshes, Hitchcock Pond, Stuyvesant Pond, places like that. West Beach, Long Lake would be a good spot for that. And then in Lake County, Forsyth Park's a great spot to go look for these dabbler ducks. Cedar Lake, in LaPorte County, you have Stone Lake and Pine Lake over there. So they tend to go to lakes. So that's where you kind of want to look for dabblers, is on the shallower lakes. But again, in migration, you can get birds pretty much anywhere. This bird's the green-winged teal. It's our smallest dabbler. Look, it has that green stripe going through the chocolate head. Green wings, very hardy duck. They're here really late into the fall, and you can usually find a few in winter. Again, I've seen them at Roxana Pond. I've seen them at Seidner Dunes. I've seen them at the Port of Indiana, which is another great spot to go in the wintertime to look for birds. Again, you can kind of pull up and get out and just start scanning there. The deep waters tends to hold and not ice up quite as quick. So it's really good for divers there at the Port of Indiana and also Michigan City Harbor. So if you're going to be looking for, especially the divers, those are the areas that you want to go to, the deeper water areas. And I'll explain that when we kind of get to those birds. So this is the green-winged teal, again, our smallest dabbler. They're very quick flyers. They've been clocked at over 60 miles an hour. They like to fly in tight little flocks, and they kind of turn in unison, and they tend to fly low to the water. So if you can get a flock of migrating green-winged teals flying by, they actually go by quite quickly, but they also have these kind of, where they kind of maneuver back and forth in these tight little flocks. So that's the green-winged teal, and that's, again, our smallest dabbler. Another dabbler, and obviously a gorgeous duck, the wood duck, a male wood duck. Look at the ornate face on that and the patterns. If you look at that white fork on its throat, when birds molt in the fall, And again, I'm going to use the word exception a lot, unfortunately. There's a couple of exceptions to that, but most of all of our ducks molt in the fall, late summer, early fall, after they breed. And they go into what's called an eclipse plumage, where they basically lose their feathers and they almost look like females. Male wood ducks look quite a bit like the females when they're in eclipse plumage, but that fork on their neck will always separate them from the females, that white fork. Again, birds tend to molt in the fall because there's a lot of vegetation and it's where there's the most vegetation, so they basically want to blend in. When you lose either all or most of your flight feathers, you basically do not want to stick out. You want to be able to hide until you can get those feathers back. So by late fall, early winter, they're basically in their breeding plumage and they start looking to pair bond. There's a couple of exceptions to that, and of course I'll bring it up. It's just the way nature works. Nothing's ever straightforward like that, and I'll bring those up when we get to it. So this is the wood duck. They're a cavity nester. They nest in cavities in trees, and they also nest in wood duck nests. At the turn of the last century, this bird was heavily hunted to the point where it's nearly hunted to extinction. However, in 1918, when they came up with the federal guidelines for hunting ducks, the federal rules, and they put bag limits in, this bird exploded back. And one of the reasons is they have 2 broods a year. All the other ducks only have 1 brood a year. And if a nest gets destroyed early enough, they might re-nest. But this bird will actually have 2 full broods a year, especially in the South. So again, they're cavity nesters. So it's always interesting to see a duck perched up in a tree. And you look up and go, what is a duck doing up in a tree? Well, there's probably a nest hole nearby. So this is the male wood duck. And again, it's one of our dabbling ducks. Now we're going to switch over to the divers. I think we're going to look at about a dozen divers or so. And this is a canvasback duck, one of our divers. And I'm even going to break those into subsets. The next 4 or 5 birds are going to be called in the bay ducks. They tend to be out in deeper water like the other divers, but they're also coming to shallower water too, where some of the other birds later on won't. This is a canvasback. You can tell it has a red head, and there's the 2 birds that have red heads. I'm going to follow the other one. And if you look, it has this red head that slopes down onto a black bill. And it has whitish sides. This bird's quite wary, and one of its main food sources is wild celery. And apparently it makes it taste very good because it's prized by hunters for its taste. And it's so dependent on wild celery that its scientific name is in its scientific name, it has Valencia, and so does actually celery plant also has Valencia in its scientific name. So they're both kind of named, basically have the same scientific name because they're so much dependent on each other. So this is a canvasback duck. Again, it's quite wary. A really good spot to see these is if you want to walk to 129th Street and take that trail all the way around and look into the Forsyth, look into the William Power side on the Indiana side. There's always lots of them there in the wintertime, but also especially in the spring when they start coming back. If state line is no problem for you, you can actually drive into Illinois. And for the Illinois people that might be watching, drive into William Powers and go all the way to the east to State Line Road and take that road south. And on the Illinois side, sometimes I've seen literally 100 canvasbacks there. They just seem to stage there. Whatever the depth is, they just like it there. So I took this bird over at Forsyth Park, and it's another good spot. That Wolf Lake area is another good spot for him. Port of Indiana is a good spot for him. Michigan City Harbor is a good spot for them. So they tend to be in deeper water. So this is the canvasback duck. We're going to go on to the next duck, and this is the red-headed duck. Obviously well named. And unlike the canvasback that basically had the red head going onto the dark bill, this has the rounded head going down onto a blue bill. And also the sides have some wash in it, some dark wash in it. Redheads are pretty common birds. They're one of our most common birds. Most of these type of birds, like bay ducks, they nest northwest of here in the prairie pothole regions. Some of these birds are unfortunately declining because a lot of those prairie potholes are being drained for crops, mostly wheat. However, there's a lot, they're buying up a lot of land to try to help bring some of these birds back. And it seems like at least they're holding their own now, so maybe it'll work. So this is a red-headed duck. And I took this over at the Hammond Marina. And it's a really good spot to see red-headed ducks. And kind of a fast fact on that is they do a lot of their feeding at night. So unlike other ducks that rest at night, this bird will actually be feeding at night. So you see them resting a lot during the day because they need to get some rest at some point. So they'll feed sometimes during the day and rest, and they'll feed sometimes at night and also rest. So this bird will feed at night. And again, it's called the redhead. And the best way to tell them apart is to get them in the same frame. So if you look at the top, there's a redhead. I remember taking this at the rain in the rain over at Forsyth Park, which is why it's a little bit blurry, but it's still diagnostic. If you look at the top bird, it's a redhead. You can see the difference. It has that round head going onto a blue bill, and you can see the canvas back with the lighter sides with the redhead going onto a dark bill. So that's probably the best way to tell them apart if you're a beginner, is to try to get them together. But these are our two red-headed ducks, our two diving red-headed ducks. The next two birds we're going to look at are also kind of bay ducks. This first one is called a greater scaup. I took this, probably one of the best places to get this bird, and there's a few spots, is right pretty soon they'll start coming back into the Hammond Marina. And so if you walk out to the pier, there's usually mass quantities, hundreds of greater scaup there. A way to tell the greater scaup from the next bird, which is the lesser scaup, is they tend to have this very round head. And if you look at the bill, there's a lot of black on the bill. And there's also a little bit more white on the sides. Unfortunately, for reasons not known, since about 1980, this bird has declined about 50%. Other spots to see the greater scaup would be Michigan City Harbor, Port of Indiana, Portage Lakefront Park. So they tend to be out on the big lakes. That doesn't mean that you can't get them at Roxana or Cider, but they're more uncommon there. They're much more common on the big lake. So this is the greater scaup. Next bird is the lesser scaup. If you look at that bill, there's hardly any black on the bill. It also has kind of a purplish head. There's a little bit of green on it, just the way the light falls on it. And it also has a peak on the head. So sometimes scaups can be different, difficult to tell, especially at distance. Don't really worry about it, because the reasons why they are named is in flight, the lesser scaup has white primaries, secondaries going about halfway up the wing, and the greater scaup has about white primaries going 3/4 of the way up the ring. Of course, it can be a little bit difficult to tell. So a lot of times they put it down as just a scaup species, especially if you're doing lake watches up on Lake Michigan and the bird's like half mile out. You can just tell that it's a scaup, but sometimes it's hard to tell them apart from there. So have no problem calling them scaup species. And hunters actually call them bluebills because of their blue bills. So this is a lesser scaup and a greater scaup. And I just kind of told you how to tell them apart and kind of where to look for them. The lesser scaup tends to be less on the big lakes, although we always get some on Lake Michigan, but they tend to like the shallower areas like Forsyth Park, Stuyvesant Pond, Kingsbury would be good a spot for them, areas that are more shallow. So just kind of knowing where the bird at might help idea. But I think the best way to tell these birds apart is like this. I took this at the Hammond Marina. Obviously, it's kind of easy to tell them apart now. The bird on the lower left is a greater scaup. You can see it has the lighter sides, kind of a greenish head, and a round head. And the upper bird is a lesser scaup. And you can see it has that peaked head, usually kind of a dark, maybe purplish color with a little bit more wash on the side. So and these birds tend to rest a lot. So when they're not diving and they're resting, you can kind of, as you can tell, you can check off two bird species right there by the fact that they're together. Again, I took this at the Hammond Marina. Greater scaups are way more common there than lesser scaups are, but there's usually a few lessers in there. So if you can kind of go through there and find a lesser, and then you can kind of get a picture like that, and then you can be able to easily tell the difference. And it's kind of funny with these great big cameras now that you can take these photos and get home and blow them up, and a bird that was kind of hard to identify from way, way out, when you blow it up, it's like this, it's right there. And these birds are pretty far out, and I digiscope these birds out. And again, once I it, once I blew it up and looked at it, it's pretty easy to ID. So I know a lot of birders that kind of do that too. You kind of go, I think I know what it is, but it's so far out. Let me just take a picture, get it home, get it on the computer, and blow it up. And lo and behold, the birds that you could not identify in the old days, you can now identify in the new days because of these great big lenses out there. Again, Lake Michigan's really, if you're going to do a lot of birding there, it's probably good to get a scope because some of these birds, these rafts are pretty far out. But if you don't, if you just kind of enjoy taking your binoculars out there, you can do a lot of good birding there too. So this is the greater and lesser scaup. Now we're going to get into what I like to call, the old books like to call, the sea ducks. These birds are pretty almost strictly Lake Michigan ducks. This is a harlequin duck. Look at the ornate pattern on the male. As we start getting the sea ducks, I'm also going to start showing some of the females too, because the females are actually, most of the females on these are way more common than the males are. So I want to show the females too. I took this at the Port of Indiana. I guess it's technically illegal to take this, but I took the picture anyway, and it's a little blurry because I couldn't set it up the way I wanted to. Harlequin ducks are very uncommon here, but we occasionally get a few. Obviously, they're interesting birds. Lake Michigan is the place you're going to find them. Hammond Marina, like Jarrows Park, Whiting Park, Michigan City Harbor, Port of Indiana, like Dune State Park. One thing that harlequins like, they also tend to be around breakwalls. When I was in New England, I went and saw a group of them out in the ocean. They'd come down up north of Boston, and there was probably nearly 100 harlequin ducks there. And they make this interesting call. It's like this squeaky mouse call. So you're looking out, hearing like 100 mice squeaking at you as you look at these male harlequins. So if you find one of these, this will probably make the Indiana Rare Bird Alert. So it's an uncommon bird. And just a gorgeous little bird, and one of my favorite winter ducks. Here's the female harlequin. Again, it's dark. We usually tend to get more females than males, which is why I'm showing it here. It's a small dark duck, and you can look at the head patterns. It has a dot over the eye. Under the eye has a patch, and then has that ear patch. I took this at, I think last year over at Miller Beach, literally along the breakwall. That bird was there for probably weeks. So you can walk down to the U.S. Steel breakwall, and that bird was right there. So, and it was there for weeks. Again, I've seen them at Hammond Marina, Whiting Park, Michigan City Harbor, Portage Lakefront Park, Port of Indiana. So, but they're, again, these sea ducks tend to be more often found on the big lake than inland. So this is the female harlequin duck. The long-tailed duck. This bird nests way up in the high Arctic, way up above the tree line. It's a long-tailed duck, and there's two ducks that we have that actually don't have one molt. They actually have two molts. This bird molts in the fall like the other ducks do, but they also molt in the spring. So they have a completely different plumage in the spring. I've never seen one. They tend to get up on the breeding grounds before they change their molt to summer molt. And actually that head's going to be black and the body's going to be black. It's going to look completely different. I have one that I'll show a picture nest I took in April that it was starting to molt, but that's as close as I've ever gotten. Otherwise you have to get up on the high Arctic. And again, by the time they come back here in November, December, they look like this. So they're a very white duck with that long tail. And again, it's a bird that, and again, in migration, you can get any bird anywhere, but this is a bird to be looked for on Lake Michigan. So this is the male long-tailed duck. And if you hear like movies in the Arctic, they have this loud yodel-like call. So when you see documentaries from the high Arctic, a lot of times they'll put that call in there. It's a pretty distinctive call. We don't really get that here because, like I said, they're going to molt again in the summer up in the high Arctic for their second molt. I took this in April, so as you can see, it's starting to molt. The black's starting to move up on the neck. This is about as close as I'm probably going to ever get to getting one, unless we get a non-breeder sometime, which you always look for. So again, this is a male long-tailed duck. They're very, very deep divers. They've actually been caught in gill nets 200 feet below the surface. And unlike the other divers that use their legs to paddle, they also use their wings, which helps them actually get deeper into the water. So there's underwater photography of these birds. Basically, it looks like they're swimming underwater, and it helps them to get to greater depths. Again, they've been trapped in gill nets 200 feet below the surface of the water. So they get down pretty far to do that. Again, Lake Michigan is anywhere along Lake Michigan is where you want to look for this bird. Here's the female long-tailed duck. Again, doesn't have quite the long tail. Again, it's kind of a white bird, has the black patch on the back of it. Again, it's another one of those deep diving birds. Divers' legs are set further back, which helps them a lot to dive because they can use it to help propel them under the water. But unfortunately, they can't walk on land. They stumble forward. So I've actually had a few of the divers that would wash up on shore for whatever reason, and they basically can't get back into the water. So you just kind of pick them up, toss them back into the water, and they're on their way. They can kind of stumble forward, so if they're close enough to the water, they can get in. But I've literally seen some behind some of the marram grasses, which means they're probably not going to get back. And so you just, like I said, you just pick them up. You might get bit a few times, but it's worth it. And you just get them to the water, and then they go. And another problem with divers is that they need to paddle because of their weights and the way their legs are set. They need to get a running start on water. So if they get on shore, they can't do that, obviously. They can't just take off. Unlike dabblers can just, like Mel, could just take off right from the ground. They kind of need to get a running start because their legs are set so far back. So this is the female long-tailed duck. And we were just kind of talking about that before we came on here. There was shelf ice on Miller Beach as far as the eye could see. And we had about a day or two of south winds. And so what it did was the shelf ice got moved out maybe 100 yards or so. So from 100 yards out, it was ice as far as the eye could see. But between the shore and the first 100 yards, there was open water. And so I was at Miller Beach, as I often am. And here comes a duck floating right past me, right in front of me. And it was a long-tailed duck, up close and personal. So that's why I got this picture, literally just swimming right by me. So there you go with that. There's long-tailed. Now we're going to get into the scoters. There's 3 types of scoters. 2 of them are dark-winged scoters. This is a black scoter male. It's our darkest duck. It's an all-black duck, but it has that orange knob on it. That's going to separate it from pretty much any other bird. They're fairly rare here. We get flybys on the lakefront. Occasionally we can get one to tee up along maybe a breakwall. I took this at the U.S. Steel breakwall off Miller Beach. It was really far out. It was really windy. It was really dark. I'm sure other people have other pictures of it. Black scoters are our least common scoter, and the males are even less common than that. With rare exception, you're pretty much going to have to be up on the big lake to see this bird. And we get some flying by in migration, so if you can get them as flybys, but they're pretty uncommon to get it like this. And this is another bird where we get way more females than males. So I'm going to show you what the female black scoter looks like. There's a female black scoter, has a black cap. I took this at Jarrow's Park. It's a good spot for them. It has a black cap and that white neck on it. And they tend to be in groups. They tend to be somewhat gregarious, so they tend to be in at least small little groups, sometimes in large groups. So this is a female black scoter. Again, Lake Michigan is the place. And I'm just going to keep saying Lake Michigan, but whatever your favorite haunts are, you know, Michigan City Harbor for the LaPorte people, Port of Indiana, Portage Lakefront Park for the Porter County people, Miller Beach, the Hammond Marina, Gerald's Park for the Lake County people. Uh, Again, occasionally they can be found inland, but if you want to look for these birds, you want to look on the big lake for these. So this is one of the two dark-winged scoters. The second dark-winged scoter is the surf scoter. Its nickname is called the skunkhead for obvious reasons. A dark bird has those white patches, and look at that bulbous bill on it. Again, dark black. I took this at the Hammond Marina. They're also somewhat uncommon, but I believe I read somewhere that males make up about 15% of these scoters that you're going to see on the south end of Lake Michigan. So you can see how much more rare they are. Surf scoters are actually only found on this continent, and the other two are found circumpolar, which means they're found also in Europe and Asia. It's just a gorgeous bird. I think last year there was some at the Port of Indiana. There's like a little group of them. So it was a great spot to get up close and personal looking at surf scoters. This is a female surf scoter. Again, usually there's going to be a male nearby because of the pair bonding. Again, scoters are just dark, heavy birds. It has a patch in front of the eye, a patch behind the eye, and you can barely see it, but it has a patch on the back of the neck. And again, female ducks can be a little bit harder to ID, but in the winter, again, there's usually male ducks nearby, so it kind of makes it a little bit easier, especially when you can see them kind of pair bonding. So this is the female surf scoter. Here's a nice picture that I took at the Hammond Lakefront Park. The two kind of rare male birds. Here's the male surf scoter at the top, and there's a male black scoter at the bottom. So you can kind of see how separated they are. And again, the males tend to be much less common than the females. So we'll go on to the third scoter. It's a little bit easier, and I'm going to show the female first. This is a female white-winged scoter. You can see the patch in front, but you can also see the little bit of white on the wing. You actually see it more when they're in flight. It's actually quite conspicuous when they're in flight. I use this picture. Usually I try to put a little background in my pictures. I don't usually like to do this whole like this close of a picture. This bird just kept coming in front of me and coming in front of me. So it begged to be photographed. So it's on here. Again, they have white wings. The other two scoters are dark wing scoters. And it's kind of funny because when I used to do a lot more lake watches up at Miller Beach, if those dark wing scoters are going by, you'd be surprised how it's really kind of hard to tell them apart. So we'd basically log them as dark wing scoters, knowing that we couldn't tell them if it was a black or a surf. But this one you can tell because it's going to have a white wing, and it's a little bit larger. It's probably our most common scoter. A few years ago, they were literally everywhere. There was even some in Forsyth Park. There was even some in inland lakes. But on Lake Michigan, there were dozens and dozens of them pretty much wherever you went. So you just never know what winter's going to bring. Sometimes these birds are pretty uncommon, and other times they are. So which is why you keep going out in the winter to keep checking to see if what birds are common or not. Now you see why it's called the white-winged scoter. Here's a male bird. It has that little white teardrop under its eye. And it has, of course, there's a nice white patch on its white wing. So again, it's one of the sea ducks that you pretty much going to have to go out to Lake Michigan to see, unless they have an eruption year like they had a few years ago. And again, they were even found on inland lakes that year. And you just never really know what brings them down or what phenomena brings them down some years, and other years it doesn't. This is the male white-winged scoter. Now we're getting into the real winter ducks. Midwinter, these birds are probably the most common. And this bird is called the common goldeneye. It's kind of a smaller bird. When I think of cold weather ducks, I think of this bird. If you could look at the top of the picture, there's ice there. I remember when I took this picture at the Hammond Marina, I literally got frostbite taking my gloves off to try to digiscope this bird. They're really common. They're common everywhere, especially on Lake Michigan, but you can also get them inland. You can the golden eyes you can see has obviously the golden eye and has that patch underneath of it. And an interesting characteristic of that is, you know, these ducks have bare legs on them, so you wonder how they can be on water that's like in the 30-degree temperature range. And they have special blood vessels in their legs that basically pump bloods down that's warm, but on the way up it's cool. So they basically are saving energy by letting the leg going back up that's going to head into the body actually cool down quite a bit. So it uses less energy, but yet the blood pumping down on the other side is basically, on each leg, is basically warming the one side and then cooling the other side as it switches back and forth. So you always kind of wonder, like, how do those birds have bare legs and not have feathers all over them? Well, that's how it is. They have specially adapted blood vessels in their legs to be able to do that. So I know that the day that I took this, I wish I had those blood vessels in my fingers. That's all I could remember. But so this is a common goldeneye, again, one of our most common winter ducks. And this is the smallest of the divers. It's a bufflehead duck. It's a small little duck. It's called bufflehead. It has that white bonnet on the back of its head. Pretty unmistakable. Again, I think of cold weather ducks. Bufflehead and the goldeneye are the two that I think of first. Usually you see them floating in and diving around ice flows out in the water. They're kind of interesting because when they dive down, but when they pop up like corks. So it's interesting to see them when they pop up. They almost kind of leave the water as they pop up like a cork. Again, they're diving for little crustaceans, for mussels at the bottom of the creek. And I want to go back to one because something that I wanted to say about the common goldeneye. Starting in late winter, they start going into bonding with the females, and they have a very interesting mating ritual. What they do is they drop their head forward, then they flip their heads all the way back so their bill's pointing backwards, and they make these really loud insect-like calls. They sound nothing like a duck. So maybe you can get on your phone sometime and play what they sound like in mating. It's like they sound like some kind of an insect. They don't sound like it. But their mating ritual is to put their head forward and then literally rocket it back so that their bill's facing backward, and they make this call. So it's kind of interesting to be out there when the golden eyes are there. And also when they fly, hunters call them the whistling duck because they have a loud whistle in their when they fly. That goes when the air goes through their wings. So sometimes if they're coming from behind you don't see them, you can actually hear them before you can actually see them. So I wanted to make sure that I put that in there. There's our bufflehead. Now we're getting into the mergansers. We're getting kind of near the end here. We're getting, there's 3 species of mergansers. Look at that long bill. Mergansers are almost primarily fish eaters. This is the hooded merganser. They actually breed here. Before the heron rookery kind of became a marsh, it was actually a swamp with a lot of trees in there. So in the 1960s and 70s, when I'd be hiking back there, there'd be a lot of these birds up in the trees, mating up in the trees and then nesting in the holes in the trees. So they're a cavity nester, kind of like the wood duck is. So they're called hooded mergansers, not because they look like this, but because they look like this. So they can actually drop their hoods down and pull them up. So this is a hooded merganser that I took at the Highland Rookery, and you can see how it has its hoods up. And again, look at that bill. It actually has a little knob on the end of it, and it actually has, all 3 mergansers have tooth-like projections in their bills to hold on to fish. Again, they're primary fish eaters, which is why they have those long bills. And they're able to, like anything else that eats a fish, a pelican or a heron, they need to get it turned head first, because if they swallow it tail first, that's not the way that it's going to go down. Its scales are going to get caught, because the way the bird swims is the way that they want to swallow it, so that the scales are facing backwards and not forwards. So you often see them bring it to the top of the water, flip them up in the air. They're very good at it. And then they're going to swallow it head first, which is much easier than swallowing it the other way, where they could actually get stuck. So this is the hooded merganser. They nest here. They're kind of uncommon nesters, but there's always a few nesting, and they're here in the winter time. Um, Roxana will have plenty of them in there in the wintertime. Usually the Port of Indiana has a few in there in the wintertime. Again, some of the holdouts that have the last holdout for the least amount of ice, you can usually get them in there. They tend to be more in the swamps and the lakes than the next two are, which are mostly found out in the open water. So this is the hooded merganser. And the next bird is the common merganser. And again, look at that bill. It's long, it's pointed, it's narrow. It has tooth-like projections inside to grab fish, primary fish eaters. They have that sleek bill to them, which enable them to swim under the water at faster speeds. Again, most of the divers don't really care about how speed because they're just trying to get to the bottom. But these divers are basically chasing fish, so they have that streamlined body to help them catch fish under the water. So this is the male common merganser. He has a green head and he has no crest on him, which is going to separate it from the next one. And he also has the white front on him. They tend to be out on Lake Michigan, but they also like rivers because they're going to go in the rivers and fish. The Little Calumet River is behind my house, and oftentimes in late winter, early spring, I'll see flocks of mergansers going through there when the ice breaks, basically chasing the fish in there to eat fish in there. So again, the big lake's the best place to probably see these, but also large lakes and rivers will hold them too. So this is the common merganser. Again, it has a green head with no crest on it, which is going to separate it from this bird, the red-breasted merganser. See that crest on the male? See the darkest, kind of dark reddish breast? And see that long bill? Again, there's tooth-like projections inside of there. And but that shaggy crest is going to separate it from the common, which is much lighter. And again, Lake Michigan is a bird to see this, but you also find them on larger lakes. Forsyth Park will have them in there. Stibel Pond. The one thing I like red-breasted mergansers, they're actually one of the last birds to leave for winter. And you can also, like when I go to the Hammond Marina or Hammond Lakefront Park, they're basically stick around until May. So sometimes I can even get them on the May count before they leave and head north. So they tend to stick around a lot. Pretty easy bird to find, especially on Lake Michigan. If you kind of go there now and get on Lake Michigan, Michigan City Harbor, again, I keep rattling off the same names, but on the big lake, Port of Indiana, Hammond Lakefront Park, the Hammond Marina, pretty easy bird to find. So this is the red-breasted merganser, and I took this at the Hammond Marina. Okay, the last bird we're going to look at is the ruddy duck, and it's very interesting duck. This is the second bird that has two molts. This is its spring-summer molt. In late winter, they start getting this. It's actually in its own family. It's in the stiff-tailed ducks, and the closest member of this bird is actually you have to go down to South Texas and into Mexico to find it. It's called a mass duck. I took this at Grant Street. You can see it's that tail that sticks up, which is why they call it. It's in the stiff-tailed duck family. They have that white cheek patch on it. Excuse me, and they have a blue bill. They often spin in the water, kind of like phalaropes do, and they tend to be in groups. And again, this bird tends to stick around pretty late until April, sometimes even into May before they leave. Ruddy ducks, again, are in their own family, so they're different than all the others, but they are a diving duck. And again, like I said before, they actually have two molts, and we get to see both molts here. So this is kind of what they look like in the spring, summer. And this is what they look like in the wintertime. This is a male ruddy duck in say like January, February. You see he lost all that red color that he has there. And he basically goes into here, but he'll always have that white cheek patch. So that's going to separate him from the other birds. They're smaller, they're very gregarious, so they tend to be in little groups or even large groups. Grant Street's a great spot to get these birds, but you can get them pretty much on any ponds or lakes in the area. As long as, again, ice is the limiting factor. If you can find water that's open, you can find ducks there. So that was the last of the ducks that I wanted to talk about. One duck that I kind of want to honorably mention, because I was, a while back I was going through, as I often do, going through Ken Brock's monumental Birds of the Indiana Dunes. And I was looking at this one bird, and I was kind of fascinated with the fact that before in the 1980s, there was like about 20 records of this bird. And since then, there hasn't even been a handful of it. And I've only seen one in my 40 plus years of birding, and it was at Jarrow's Park about 20 years ago. And the bird I'm talking about is the king eider. Now, I know they had one shot down, I think, Kingsbury or something this year, but I'm just kind of interested about why was it much more common pre-1980 than it was after 1980? Are there just that many less of them left that they're declining so much that there's just not enough of them out there? Or are they changing their winter patterns where their winter territories are? An example would be evening grosbeaks. In the 70s and 80s when I was birding, pretty much almost it seemed like almost every other year you get evening grosbeaks near me. They had box elder trees and they were there. And then they literally disappeared for a while. And now it's not really every other year, but now it seems like it's about every 5 or 6 years that you get mass quantities of evening grosbeaks, if that. And I read an article about how they basically changed their winter territories from being more here in the Midwest to being more east. So we just have less of them here because they've changed their winter territories over the decades. So I was just curious about the king eider. So hopefully we'll get a king eider soon, and hopefully one of these people watching this presentation right now will be able to find that bird. That would be a very good coup, and you'd make a lot of birding friends if that bird sticks around, because a lot of people would like to go see that bird, including, I'm sure, a lot of people from downstate. So I just kind of threw that out there as a caveat. As we wind things up, I just want to thank people for jumping on here and watching this Dunes-Calumet Audubon presentation on winter birds. So again, thank you for watching, and good birding, and I'll throw it back to Kim.
Thanks, Michael. Sure, I would be happy to be one of those people that spots the king eider. Of course, we put it in our checklist, and it'll eBird will be saying, "What? What do you see there?"
Photos are worth 1,000 words. That's all I would tell eBird.
Yep. And my biggest stumbling block is getting the camera from the house to the car.
Yeah.
And then the next part is getting it from the car out to take a picture. So
exactly.
Looks like the Pat Moores are saying thank you for a good job.
Okay.
Everybody's welcome. We do appreciate your presentation. Are there any questions? Anybody have any questions? I see a message from Camille also says, very interesting. Thanks for sharing your pictures and knowledge. One of our Facebook attendees. Anybody have a question? Does anybody have any questions about birds? Maybe we'll see you out there this weekend. I think that some of us are going to be braving it out there. Let's see, where is Roxana Pond? Someone is asking. And before you answer, Michael, I will just suggest that people check out our website because Matt Kawasinski and Brad Bumgardner just uploaded some information about the Roxana area and directions on how to get there. Is there anything you'd like to add about that, Michael?
No. I was actually going to suggest that too. All these places that I just named, and I know people are in certain counties and they don't know about other counties, but they'd like to go. eBird's a good spot to go to. They have hot spots, so you can go to eBird and they have literally every place in Lake Porter, LaPorte, Newton, Jasper, Pulaski, wherever you want to go, have all the birding hotspots there. 40, 50 hotspots for each county. And so you can kind of click through and go through, and you can actually look at the list of birds that have been seen there recently. So that's a good spot. And the Dunes-Calumet site and the Audubon site that Matt and Brad put together is a great spot to go to look for that. So yeah, but it's actually Roxana is in East Chicago, right near the toll road. You take Route 41, and it's right next to the toll road. In fact, you're actually going to go under the toll road at some point. But yeah, it's best just to kind of look that up. So
Well, it's a good thing that my car likes to go around the block because when I went there this past Friday to check on the American White Pelican, I did have to turn around a couple times before I got myself in the right direction.
okay, yeah,
It's not a place that I go to often.
no,
So,
but now you know where it's at.
yes, yes. I just threw up on the screen that we do have merchandise now available on the Threadless site, dunescalumet.threadless.com, and you can get our logo on different products. So check that out for us. And it's not on here right now, but I should mention that we are also on Smile Amazon. So if you do a lot of Amazon shopping, be sure to click in your account, smile.amazon.com, and then you can choose the donor that it goes to, and Dunes-Calumet is now on that also. Our next presentation, oh, we've got a comment from Allie on Facebook. She says, a shout out to Seidner, Dune, and Swale. There was 107 common mergansers. That's real close to the Roxana area. And you can see that if you take the toll road heading that way. But you can look that up on either eBird or our website. Our next monthly program is going to be in February. And you can see it's going to be birding technology with Julie Bonema. So that'll be very exciting. And I believe that is, I can't quite see oh, there it is. February 17th, I believe it is our next program. Any other questions for Michael, or anybody have any questions about Dunes-Calumet? We're in the midst of our Climate Watch survey. If anybody wants to go out and help document the data that is leading to Michael's suspicions about changing winter ranges, National Audubon Society's Climate Watch survey program tries to document that. And there's still time to get involved with that. We have a few more places that are looking for birders to go and survey for eastern bluebird or white-breasted nuthatch. So I'll put us back to our pictures. I'm so glad that all of you could join us today and learn some more ID techniques about winter ducks. And hopefully you'll go out and do a little birding this weekend, but try to stay warm. Any other last questions? Let me see. I think there's some chats here. Okay, thanks for all the great information. There's a link put up on the chat about the birding sites on our website. And I think that's all the questions that I see. So it looks like everybody's been very, very happy with all your information, Michael. So thank you so much. And like I said, next month we'll learn a little bit more about the technology involved with birding. So I'll let everybody go then. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Pauline. She says, thank you for sharing. Bye. Happy birding.
Bye.